Hi, and welcome to the Scientist Sage Sangha. I'm Nancy Anderson Dolan from Wise Heart Wellness. And tonight, we're very glad to have you join us to talk about chords. And this is not the kind that you play on a guitar or a piano or you tie up your bag with. It is about energy chords. And this is a topic really near and dear to my heart because I started learning about it about 30 years ago and learned from a shamanic teacher. And I didn't really think maybe that was true or anything, but I'll tell you a little of my experience as we go along. But first of all, the idea is just about understanding the energetic ties between things, between people and animals, their pets, between people and things. They might be a building or a ring or all sorts of things, but also between other people. And it might be people they've been very attached to, like a spouse or a child, things like that. Or it can be people that they admire. There's things called superfans in sports and movies and that sort of thing. And some of them get obsessed with the point of their attention. And then there's just simple things like high school boy having a crush on a girl in his class. And so there's so many things. And people think about cord cutting as cutting energetic ties between people that are only negative. And there's all sorts of reasons that you would cut negative ties, like perhaps a messy divorce or with, a friend that you had a falling out with, those kinds of things. But there are also the practice of cutting ties with the idea of refreshing the energetic tie between you and another. And so people might get overly attached to the drugs of choice. It might be an addiction kind of issue. That cutting of ties can be very, very helpful. And it's not necessarily just because it's a negative thing, but it is this time for readjustment to things that we can take by interrupting the flow of energy, rethinking it, intentionally reconnecting. And so there's lots of things that can be done with cord cutting. I'm going to tell you a little bit. Most traditions, spiritual traditions, have some sort of idea like this, and it's done in different ways. And people maybe misunderstand a bit that the cord cutting is not the physical act itself that necessarily causes the letting go of those energetic ties, but it's the power of ritual. And if people are thinking, well, ritual isn't that powerful, just think about a marriage, a wedding. The ritual of a wedding or the ritual of baptism or just the rituals that some cultures, some faith traditions have for when children are moving from childhood to adolescence, things like that. And we don't necessarily have a lot of rituals that are carried through in the same way that they used to be, with a lot of tending intentionally to the energetic side of a ritual. When people passed away in older times, there was a longer period of mourning. There were very specific kinds of rituals that were done. And a lot of those things had grown out of even older things that were meant to send the deceased on their way and let go of our ties to them. So we didn't hold them back from going on to the next thing after death. And so that we didn't get bogged down by energy ties from someone who had passed on, that perhaps they had passed on suddenly without warning, with a desire to not go, things like that. So there's a lot of background to this and lots of things in our everyday world that really are talking about that. Just 1 second. Just admit somebody that got booted out here. So this idea of that, the energy cords are literally bridges of information and energy between people and or things, or pets or animals or trees. So people can intentionally create those, but sometimes we just fall into them as well. And so it's useful. It's the person whose video was on the email that I sent out, she talks about it as spiritual hygiene, which I love that description of it. And a lot of the time there's talk about if you're fatigued a lot, or just disorganized and feel out of sorts and that sort of thing, it can be a really useful thing to do some cleaning up and cutting cords. And if you have a negative perception of someone, it can be a useful thing to cut that cord and just see if there is another more positive connection that may form. So this idea of it is, it's not negative to cut somebody off. Okay, if you are experiencing a negative connection with someone, when you cut it, you may be relieving both of you of a bad connection. And if it is a necessary connection, you can't cut away things that you need. Your soul down deep will go back looking for them, and it will grow back if you need it. And there is this idea that if I send it away with a negative intent, that I will get negative energy back to me. That happens in everything all the time in the world. It's not just cord cutting. If I have somebody sending me negative energy and I go, oh, they're a horrible person, and send that energy back in that way, I create more of it. So cord cutting is a way to do it without that. Just saying, okay, this doesn't feel right, this doesn't feel good, and I think if I did something conscious and specific about it, I think I might feel better. And so this idea about that, there's different modes of thinking about it from different traditions. In the email, the video there was talking about different connections at different chakras, which I found quite useful to think about, like a root chakra connection being about survival and safety. And as a counselor, helping people break patterns that were based on survival and safety can be really difficult. They think they're ready to let go, maybe a substance, if they're an addict, or a behavior or a relationship that hasn't been serving them. But if it has anything to do with safety, they have to do a little more conscious work around it to actually let it go. And doing cord cutting is another piece of the consciousness we can bring to it. And there's lots of different ones that you can find in that YouTube from the list. But the things we want to build on as well. So when I cut cords, I sort of clear things up and I get to look at what else I want to bring in. I was doing this work with a group of people last night, and we had people that had done it before, and we had people that had never heard of it before. And so we were doing something pretty general about just getting in your bodies and looking with what shamans call second sight. But really, it was just looking through your body to see if there's something odd. And so that doesn't look like it is the natural way of being. And some people saw little black points sticking out, and some people actually saw, like bugs on their arm or different things like that. It can look like that. And it can look like an actual cord, like a rope going between you and another person. And it can be just all sorts of little strings that go out in the world. So there's a lot of different things that it might look like. But when you're taking care of it in this conscious, specific way, it is actually, you pay attention to what shows up. And you may, if you don't see anything show up, it's very useful to use your imagination to suppose something. This is what I think it might look like. And that is just as useful as if you are somebody who has lots of vision and sight like that and you see something. So it's not one better than the other. It's just different ways of going through the experience. And as we go through life, we will create connections, and good ones, difficult ones. And it's literally like you wouldn't only vacuum your house once in your lifetime. There's things that fall on the floor. We got to vacuum often. And cord cutting can be useful like that as well. And if you're trying to establish a particular pattern in your own life, maybe it's being healthier, that sort of thing, you might be doing this over and over, and it might take many times, whether that's a connection to a person or to a way of eating, or a loss of some sort, an old job or something. We may think we want to let it go, and on the first thing we will, and that will help. But we may not be willing in other levels of our unconsciousness. And so if it feels like it's still there, we do it again. It doesn't mean we didn't do it right the first time. It means that it takes more attention, that particular issue. So that's the majority of what I wanted to talk about. I'm going to just talk about the idea of making transitions, because we don't have as many rituals or ceremonies to do these kinds of things, that we don't transition in the same way. Like when children are transitioning from childhood to adolescence, we don't have those kinds of transitions for them. So doing things like this in a simple ceremony kind of way can be really, really helpful. And we make transitions from, like, losing a parent. If we can move into it very intentionally and change that tie, often when you lose someone you love, it does, you sort of cut the cord to the idea of them being physically with you on this plane, and you move into a different tie. And you might literally see a different kind of cord between the two of you. Doesn't mean that you cut off everything because their body has passed away. So looking into those kinds of different things really helps transitions. As even small children, when their older siblings go off to school, that sort of thing, they have to change how they're connected to their older siblings. They don't get to go with them. And you can, with a child, they're really open to this kind of thing. And you can say, okay, that's, we're going to pull that back. We're going to let Bobby go off to school, and we're going to think of him still attached by this lovely light cord, and he'll come back and see us tonight. And children really feel comforted by these kinds of things. So those kinds of creating a new space and new energy for ourselves, creating transitions, all of those kinds of things. And the idea of illness and energy deficits, these are often caused by having too many cords out there. If someone identifies themselves as a, super caregiver or codependent or things like that, you can bet they have a lot of cords going out in a lot of places. And again, it's not about cutting everybody off. It's about stabilizing ourselves and being able to still stay connected to people. So we change how we connect. And there may be people that we do disconnect from, that we're not able to establish a good balance with. And so we can go through that kind of thing. And it may even be a parent or somebody who had been very close to us, but as we shift and grow and evolve, we start to notice that when we're around that person, we feel a little bit tired. Or when we think of that person, even, we feel a little bit different. So we go through this and go through our lives just like you would go through your house, cleaning different rooms. The first time I learned it, I went through my list, and it was all sorts of different kinds of things that had happened to me in childhood that were difficult, and I still had an energetic tie to that. Things that were not going the way I wanted them to. When I went to university, it took me a very long time to get through university. And I had a sort of a tie about that idea to learning and the way learning had to go and that sort of thing. And so there were a lot of things that I let go of. And we actually stood in a river, and as we pulled things out, we literally would throw leaves or a pine cone or a piece of wood in the river. and let it flow away from us, and then turn the other way in the river and ask for what we wanted to feel. I wanted to feel connected with good friends. I wanted to have deep connections where I could be truthful. Things like that I wanted to have. But then there was the most surprising thing for me was the understanding that my teacher taught us about, that if I had a bad experience with someone, and it might be like literally they harmed me or they defamed me or things like that, often when that happens, they are grabbing our energy, but we are also grabbing theirs, even though it's a negative connection. Because when somebody pulls your energy away, it can be a really, really reflexive, natural thing to reach out and want to grab some back. And so we've exchanged energy. And so one of the other things I did was think about all of those kinds of circumstances and see where there were things coming out of me. And I could actually see these things, and I would cut those cords too, because I was hanging on to part of them. So it was a very enlightening experience, quite literally, because you feel so much lighter, and when you let go of those kinds of things. And it could be as trivial as the boy you dated in junior high that stood you up, or it could be as important as having suffered some sort of attack, or someone stole your vehicle, or that you don't even know, someone you don't even know that took your vehicle, and but you feel so strongly about them, or governments, things like that. Anytime we put energy out, we want to gather it back in. So that is enough of my talking about that. I would invite you to do a little visualization about this, and please know that this is just an example. There are so many ways, and I really encourage people to look on the meditation app called Insight Timer, and there are literally 100,000 meditations on that app, and they have some lovely examples of cord cutting, lots of different ideas. And I would really encourage you to give yourself free rein to create your own ritual and try things out and see what gives you the relief, the increase in energy, the letting go of things, and feeling that you have actually let it go. And the practices that you might do that might take more than one or two or several attempts, or not attempts, they grow, you stack them, they start, and then you start to build them. So just relax. If you want, feel free to go off camera if you're live with us. And if you would like, just close your eyes, get comfortable, whatever way you would like to. And I encourage you to just do some exploration or take on something that's not really big to start. So just relax, and you might close your eyes and just like you are standing beside yourself, looking at you and seeing there may be visible things that you can actually see where they're going, and there's a connection to someone else. And that might be ones that you are aware of, and they might be lovely connections to a friend, or it might be a troubled connection, maybe to a coworker. It might be a connection to a place you haven't been in a long time. It might be a connection to a compulsive behavior. So just browse, just breathe and browse. And as I said, you might see something that seems like it shouldn't be there. one person I was working with, I saw a string of Christmas lights around her leg. And that definitely seemed odd. Or it might just be a different color of light that just triggers something in your mind. And just call from within yourself your light, your spark. And you might literally just find your hand glowing and you can just move it like a knife and cut the cord. Or you might visualize something. I know a lot of people like the full visualization of like a Star Wars lightsaber, the whole sound turning on and the light bar coming up to move it in front of them and cut those connections. And other people just imagine scissors. So you can do it in the way that is most uniquely suited for you. And you might do it with intention to send that energy back to the person that you were connected from, their energy back to them, and pulling yours back to you. And the same idea works for places and things. Withdrawing energy from substances that I might overuse, and literally sending those substance lights back to them. So it's not in my field any longer. And for people that you just want to refresh a connection with, the same kind of thing, sending their energy back and bringing yours in, but add in the intention that you want to weave yourselves back together. And putting your energy out as an offering, not as an attachment to them, just as an offering. Filled with light and love and just that flowing energy. Not trying to capture anything or control anything, just putting that offering out there. And sometimes, if it's been a long time relationship, or if it's been someone who has passed away that you've grieved for a long time, you may find that you literally have to unweave the connection. Just unweave it. So take your time and do that if you need to. And if you're finished, just breathe that extension you had back into you, gathering your life force back to yourself. Not cutting yourself off from people, but making yourself full and ready for connection. In the ways that are wisest and best for you and the other person, being, thing, moving forward. So you might say things like, I release you. Or if you're refreshing, I release you and invite you to reconnect. And if you feel you've had energy gathered up of someone else's that you do not want to reconnect with, my teacher has always said, we send that back with love. We do not send it back with malice, because we create more malice in the world, and it can rebound on us. And so we send that energy when we're having a final connection with someone back to them with love. And I always like to finish with, and so it is. And so it is. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So the people that are watching this at another time, thank you for joining us. And please put any questions or comments down below the YouTube videos, or send them to scientistsage@gmail.com. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I am with you. You are with me. Blessed be.